So I've not cleaned Bugsy's bridle or saddle in forever, so I thought they were well overdue a clean, and my excuse is that I've not been riding him as much. He's had a little bit of a winter break, but now he's coming back into work, so I thought, let's get his bridle clean, let's get his saddle clean, let's get his girth, stirrup leathers, stirrups and my boots clean, and we could go for a little ride. If you can't tell on my shirt, it's nearly Christmas. It's the 16th of December when I'm filming this video. So I thought after we've cleaned all our tack, we can go and dress Bugsy up for Christmas and go on a Christmas ride. First things first, when I'm tack cleaning, I need some sponges. I normally have one sponge that I just leave just to have water on it, and then I have another sponge which I use for my saddle soap. Today I'm using NAF's saddle soap. And then I have, for after I've cleaned everything, I have some leather balsam, a sponge, and then inside I have a sponge as well. The last thing I have, obviously, is a bucket of water, which I use mainly for my saddle soap, and I'm just going to pop a sponge in there now, and also pop the saddle soap sponge in, because you do need a little bit of water to get a bit of lather up on the soap before you start. I thought we could start with my saddle today because that tends to be the easiest thing to clean, and for those of you that haven't cleaned anything horsey before, maybe it's your first time, this is the easiest thing to clean. So I thought we would start over here and get that out of the way first. Here we are with my saddle. I've got my soapy water here. Not my soapy water, I've got my bucket of water here. I tend to work with warm water because it just gets in the leather a little bit more, but you can use cold water if you don't have access to warm water. A really good way to get warm water if you're in your yard and you have electrics, but you don't have warm water, say from your sink. If you don't have a sink, I don't have a sink in my yard, I tack clean at home. I find that a kettle and boiling it and then putting it into your cold water is a really good way. So we start with a damp sponge. I always squeeze it out, and your saddle soap. So saddle soap is literally soap for your saddle. It's very cheap from tack stores. You can get leather cleaner. I tend to work with saddle soap though. I used to work with leather cleaner a lot, but now because saddle soap is a lot cheaper and it just lasts forever, I've had this literally 2 years, I use saddle soap. So you get your damp sponge and you just rub it on the saddle soap like this, and you'll begin to see a sort of lather building up on your sponge and in the saddle soap. So you just keep rubbing it until you've got a really nice lather. It's literally like soap you would use on yourself. So I've got a lot of lather on here now, a lot of soap. Probably hear it, it's very, very soapy. And then moving over to your saddle, I know that some people like to go over their saddle first with just a wet cloth. You can absolutely do this, just like that. I don't tend to do this. It's actually quite good for if you want to have a really deep clean, as it just works with soap whilst you are working. So I've gone over it with a wet cloth. I don't do this every time, I very rarely do this, but this time we'll treat my saddle. So you've got your soapy sponge, and all you're going to do is on your saddle do little circles, just working the soap into your saddle. I tend to use the soft side of my sponge. Some sponges have a soft side and a hard side. I tend to use the soft side for the top of the saddle and that sort of area. I don't really want to scratch the leather. It's not the nicest saddle. It's very old. It does the trick though, and I want to keep it in as good a condition as I possibly can. And don't forget when you're doing your saddle to get these back panels as well. These are very important. Some saddles have a leather bottom as well, so underneath. This saddle, it's all fleecy, sort of, not fleecy but not leather, so I don't clean that like I clean a leather saddle, but if my saddle had leather underneath or synthetic leather, I would use my sponge to go under there as well. I completely forgot to say, but you will need a towel as well. We've got a Christmas themed towel today, it's got Rudolph on it. And this is just to dry your tack, because if it's damp and it's left damp and you store it in a damp place, it's not easy to maintain. So it's good to put it away clean and dry so that it can stay like that. So what I do is I just wipe the soap off. Don't have to get all the soap, I know it stays in the stitching, but don't worry, we will get rid of that later. So I'm just very roughly getting all the soap that I can, just the main bits. I've now got all of the main bits of soap off my saddle, however there is still some soap in the stitching, and for that I take my damp cloth, my damp sponge that's not got any soap on it, and I just run it down the panels. And if you have a floor which you don't want to get wet, make sure you put a towel underneath your saddle at this point. It doesn't matter so much with our floor because it's hard flooring, so it can just be cleaned. But you're just going to go in with your damp cloth, squeeze it out, and then take it down seams. After I've gone in with my damp cloth, I'll just go over again, give it a bit of a dry, and that is the top section of my saddle clean, but there is more. So underneath here is where the girth attaches to. You've got your saddle flap, which protects your legs from getting it hurt by all these buckles. So this is the important part of the saddle. So down here, some people have a built-in knee block, some people don't. If you can take the knee block off, do. So this is a GP saddle. GP saddles, you can lift the flap up, and then some people have CC saddles, you can't lift the flap up. Those are easier to clean, but this is a GP saddle, so we're lifting the flap up. If you have a CC saddle though, you would just need to clean your straps and the part of the saddle that you haven't cleaned up here. So again, I'm just going to go through the whole process that I did up here, but down here. So we're going to start with some soap. Underneath the saddle, I work with the rough part of my sponge more. This tends to be where the saddle gets the most greasy, so it just means that all the grease comes off and I'm left with a saddle that's going to last me. On your girth straps, there is usually a piece of leather that comes off, and this just protects this part of your saddle from your buckles when you're riding. So I tend to take this off when I'm cleaning so that I can clean this part better and the strap better as well. And it normally comes out quite easily. The saddle has had soap done to it, so I'm going to wipe the soap off and then go in with my wet cloth. Don't forget before you finish to do your flaps, which go here. when you finish cleaning your saddle, it's time for the fun part, and that involves your saddle balsam. So this is really good for just keeping a little bit of shine and suppleness in your leather. You can use any saddle balsam. Today I'm actually using one called Leather Genie. It's not horsey, we got it at Blenheim last year. It's just so good for anything leather. It just nourishes it and keeps it looking new. So I get a tiny bit of that on my sponge, just a tiny bit, doesn't need to be loads, and wipe the rest off. And then I go on my saddle. Again, you're just going to make small circles and give it a little bit of a sheen. Now, as a warning, if you have a horse that likes to buck you off, don't put too much on your seat. Bugsy has never tried to get me off in his life, on purpose anyway, so I tend to give my saddle seat a bit of a sheen too. But if your horse is known for trying to get you off, or maybe is a little bit spicy at competitions, don't put too much on your saddle seat because you'll lose your stick to it. So you won't stick as well to it and you will probably just slip off. I always say don't put too much on your sponge, because sometimes if you put too much on, it can get in the stitches and just clog up, and it's not sticky, but it's quite thick and water resistant if you have a really good one, so it's quite hard to get out of your stitching. You might have to clean your saddle again to get it out. Another good thing about doing the saddle first is that when I ride, it's not going to be sticky and horrible. It's all going to have gone into the saddle, and it will be so supple and so nice for me and Bugsy. So a lot of you have asked me the question recently, where is Reggie? And so Reggie is my thoroughbred. He's a newer horse. I've had him two years, so he's not that new, but he is newer than Bugsy, and he's not featured recently on my YouTube channel, so a lot of you are asking where he is, and my answer to you is he's fine. He's still with me. He's in the stable next to Bugsy, living his best life, and he's just not featured on the channel because he's had a bit of a break. It's been winter. He has just been having a break from YouTube, but he's going to be back very soon because I'm going to be giving him a Christmas clip. I won't give too much away, but he's going to be very Christmassy, so keep your eyes out for that. But today it's Bugsy's turn to get decked out for Christmas. A lot of you have also asked me what my plans are with Reggie in the next year, and honestly it's just to have fun. So when I originally got him, and you might see in a few of my early YouTube videos, I said that Reggie, I wanted to compete him, and we bought him as my next competition horse because Bugsy is getting on a bit and we just wanted him to have a nice chilled out time, and so we got Reggie to compete, but he doesn't have the brain for competing. Not in a cleverness way, just in a, he just doesn't like the atmosphere, so there's been a bit of a change of plans. It's no longer going to be my competition horse, or at least I don't think he is, unless he matures a little bit or has a change of heart, or maybe decides he actually likes it, then he may well be, but he is no longer going to be a competition horse. He is like Bugsy, just going to be a fun horse, mainly happy hacking, a little bit of jumping, just a little bit of everything. And in the future I will look out for another horse at some point that I can compete on, third time lucky. Bugsy's saddle is now done, so I'm going to put the flaps back on. What it will do now is just sit for a little bit in the kitchen while we do Bugsy's bridle and just absorb all of the goodness we've just put on it, so that when it's time to ride, that is completely wrong. When it's time to ride, it's just going to be really soft leather, and it's really nice to think when I know it's a faff cleaning your tack after every ride, but when you've done it, it's a really good feeling, and you know you're looking after something that's actually quite expensive to replace. And don't forget to put your blocks back on, because this is going to help keep you in the saddle. Saddle, completed it. Bridle, not so much. So I always find people, well, the bridle is a lot more work than a saddle, however it's actually not too different, and it's actually easier in some ways. So the first step for your bridle is undoing all of the straps, and if you're not familiar with the bridle, I would recommend noting down what hole everything is on. So for example, your cheek pieces which attach to your bit will be on the same hole either side, so I'd note down from the bottom. So Bugsy's on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up from the bottom, so I'd note cheek pieces 7, and then for his noseband it's on the top hole from the bottom, so I'd just note down top hole on noseband, and anything else that maybe you need to remember, I would note it down as a little tip for you. And if your bridle is anything like my bridle at the moment, it's quite stiff. I've not used it in a while. I should have cleaned it before I put it away for Bugsy's little break, however I did not. So we're going to have to use some muscle power to get it all undone now. Okay everyone, my bridle's been taken apart. It is quite difficult to take a bridle apart when it's stiff, but it's done. Everything that could be taken apart has been taken apart. I now have been left with my bit, and we need to clean it. This is probably one of the most important things to clean, and this is important to clean also after every ride, because imagine having something in your mouth that's just not been cleaned for a while, and it's a bit disgusting. So I'm going to put it in some warm water just to get it nice and warm. Maybe if there's any little bits of grass on it, it will just make them easier to get off. And I'm going to leave that to soak for the time that we're cleaning the bridle. So like I said before, in some ways a bridle is easier to clean than a saddle, and I bet you've never heard that before, but it is. So basically what I do with my bridle is I have a fresh bucket of warm water, and I just put all of it in the bucket, like so. So my bridle is now in my bucket of water. And this just means it started to maybe, like the bit that's currently in water, get some hairs off it, some little pieces of straw, maybe some little pieces of grass that were on it, and it's just soaking. Do not soak your bridle for ages, that's really bad for the leather, but a little bit like this doesn't hurt as long as you moisturise it afterwards. And then from there, I will get my first piece of leather out. It is our headpiece and brow band, because my brow band doesn't actually come off my headpiece. It gets about that far and then it won't come off. I'm sure it would come off if I really wanted it to, but I don't really want it to come off. So it stays on, it gets cleaned when it's on. As with the saddle, we bring our saddle soap in, nice lather it up, maybe we dip it in the water, lather a little bit more, and we get the leather soapy and take off any grime. So what we're doing today is a deep clean. You wouldn't typically do this every day unless you've got time. This is quite good to do every day. But after a general ride, when you've just got to clean your tack off, it's quite good just to give it a wipe down, maybe put a little bit of balsam on it, a little bit of tack conditioner. You can get that in your local tack shop, just to keep it nice and supple, and you should end up with a bridle that's really supple, really nice for you and your horse to work with. We now have a very soapy bridle, and the next step is really good if you have a sink. If you don't have a sink, use a separate bucket of water, but I'm just going to rinse off all of the soap. And this is where it's easier than a saddle, because you can't dunk your saddle in a bucket of water, but you can dunk a strip of leather. So just go in, give it a nice rinse. Maybe I'll just massage a little bit, make sure to get all the soap, and when it dries it is actually quite hard to get off. Once you're happy with it, you can put it out to dry. So I'm actually drying my pieces of leather on the Arga today. It's not really that warm. I'd say it's like lukewarm. It's not even on. It's not been on since 3 hours ago, so it's kind of warm, but it's not really warm. I put a towel on it, and I'm just going to lay the leather on the towel. And now I'm going to repeat that process for all the other pieces of leather in my bucket. I finished all of the other pieces of my bridle, and I'm now on to the last part, which are my reins. And I wanted to just come back to you for this bit because this is very important. But there are a few parts of your reins that you should not do with soap. So the part that you hold, the grippy bit, please do not clean that with saddle soap. If you're going to clean it, and you do need to clean it, you're just going to get your sponge that hasn't got any product on it and just run over it with that, okay? And this is a really good part of the bridle to clean after you've rode, because it'll get sweaty on your horse's neck, and then when the sweat dries it's harder to get off. So this is a little bit of motivation for you to actually clean your bridle after you've rode. So luckily mine are actually really clean, there's no sweat on them, so I don't have to work too hard. And then for the leather bits of your bridle that you don't hold, you can go over it again with your saddle soap as normal. It's really important where the bit is to really get in to cracks, because there'll be a lot of sweat around here. The horse sweats a lot on their neck, so it's important to get it off. And it's really important to get sweat off in general, because it's not good for leather, so it will decrease the life of your bridle, and we don't want that. Welcome back. It's time for the fun bit. So we're going to get our leather balsam again, leather conditioner, whatever you want to use. Our soft sponge, we're going to get a little bit on here, not so much, remember about the stitching. And we're going to pick up our first piece of leather, and I'm going to do my cheek pieces first. Because these always, for me, tend to be the parts which are the least supple. So I'm just going to go over them really carefully, making sure to get every little bit. Doing the sides as well. A lot of people don't get the sides, and to be fair, you would normally get them anyway, even if you don't focus on them, but I just like to make sure that they are definitely done by turning them on their side. And that's our first piece of leather conditioned. So tack cleaning is so good for your leather in general, but it's also a really, really good time to check your stitching. So if you see on your reins is very important. If you saw a loose stitch, then you would replace your reins, because on your next ride it could potentially break. And depending on your pony, you could either stop moving and your bridle's broken, or your pony, and this would probably be Reggie, your pony would take the opportunity to go a little bit quicker, and I don't think we want that when there's not a lot of control. So really important to check your stitching. You're just looking for if your stitches are loose, maybe there's a piece of string sticking out, just checking that your bridle is in working condition. This is such a nice task to do, just to relax and be present in the moment, which sounds really silly, but sometimes I think we all get so caught up on our phones and TikTok and YouTube and places like that we kind of forget to be in the present a little bit more, and just doing little things like this can help just sit you down, have a moment with yourself, put some music on. It's just quite a nice little exercise. Maybe you have some friends on your yard. Playing tag with friends is always so much more fun, and it passes it a lot quicker. You can have competitions like who can get their tag the cleanest. Now onto my reins. Again, with the reins, please do not put Barson on the grippy bits, because you will have no control. Please just do the leather bits, and it is really important to do where the bit is, because it keeps, again, this is probably the most you've heard the word supple in a while, but it keeps the leather around the bit nice and supple, so it's less likely, and it's not very likely anyway, but it's a lot less likely to break on your ride. We now have our bit back. There's lots of little pieces in the water that have come off it, and what I tend to do with the bit is just with my fingers just kind of rub the excess off. By now it comes off really easily in the water. Another thing you can do is get a toothbrush for if your bit needs a little bit more arm power, or maybe your bit design has some nitty gritty places that you can't really get to with your fingers, and I just go over and rub it all off like that. My bit is now done, so there's one thing left to do, and that's piece our bridle back together. So I like to start with the easiest part, and that is the reins. So I just bring these together, looking at my bit pieces. They're always facing in like that, like a square for the bit to go back on, and then I kind of match them up all the way to the top, and up there I can connect them, and that is our reins put back together. And then put these to the side because those go back on last. Next I'm going to take my noseband and my headpiece and put this all back together. So first I'm going to put my brow band back on. So I struggled so much, and I think if I got a new horse I would struggle again to do their bridle, because every bridle is different, and I've gotten used to my horse's bridles and what holes they have things on. So now I'm just like piece it back together super quick, but it's quite a thing to master. Always so much easier to put back together because the leather is just so much more supple, really easy to work with. It's not like that brittle leather that we started with. Just going to make sure this is nice and even now. A little bit more. Perfect. Cheek pieces time. This is where it's really important that you remembered which hole everything goes on. Because if you didn't note it down, it's not the end of the world. You can just put it back on your horse and figure out which holes, but it's a bit of a time saver if you can just be like, right, cheek pieces, hole 4, hole 7. I think what I'm going to do with my cheek pieces is actually bring them down a hole. They're normally on the top, but I've noticed recently Bugsy's head has gotten very fluffy, and I know it shouldn't affect his cheek pieces, however I think it does. So I'm just going to try them like this, just to see, and see how he thinks. And then when he gets a clip in next week now, I'm so excited for that. We're going to film like a little pony makeover because he looks so different with a clip. So when he gets his clip, we can reassess the bridle situation. But for now, this will do. And it's so shiny already. So the next part before I put the reins back on is getting my bit on. When you're putting your bit on, make sure the bit is smiling up towards the horse. That's how I always remember it. And then you can get your bit back in. I always put these over my head to see what I'm doing. Okay. And you can look at it like a horse. And that is our bridle put back together and sorted. Meet my disgusting girth. It's awful, it's muddy. It is a brown girth, however it's covered in brown mud. To clean a girth, super easy, okay? This is why I left it till last, as well as my stirrup leathers, because they're disgustingly muddy and the transformation is going to be crazy. So clean the girth, water. I'm just going to go over it like this with the rough edge and take as much mud off as possible. Now I'm going to rinse it. We have our stirrup leathers. So first things first, I'm going to take the leather off the stirrup. And then just like with the girth, I'm going to get some water and wipe off all the mud I can. Then I'm just going to get my soap sponge, get a nice lather up and get these stirrup leathers nice and soapy and clean. And now I'm going to rinse them off. Now that they are nice and clean, I'm going to go in with my towel and give them a dry. This is, if you're in a bit of a rush, you don't have time to wait for them to dry, like when I dried my bridle on the Arga, you can go in with a towel and dry them off just as easily. Right, it's time to go back in with my leather balsam. You know the drill by now. The last thing to clean are my really dirty stirrups, and I've got some really dirty water left over from the girth and everything else. So I'm literally going to put them in here and give them the scrub of their life. The final thing to do is put my saddle back together, which involves putting these stirrups back on. So some stirrups you have to put them on a certain way. These luckily have a piece of text that say back on them, so I know which side is which. So this stirrup is going on this side, which is closest to me. And I'm going to put them on hole 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then just thread it back in. There we are. Very satisfying, and my saddle has this flicky bit. My hands are very, very greasy though from all of the saddle soap, so I'm not going to do it up all the way, but that is now back on, and that is Bugsy's tack all clean and ready for our ride.
Tomorrow it is Christmas.